Andy Farrell's back at the helm, and he's picked a squad for the Six Nations. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. A few injuries for Farrell to contend with when picking a squad, and he's gone fairly conservative with it as well. So we're going to run down through who's in, and who's out through injury, and then talk about who might have possibly made the squad as well but hasn't. Right, so let's start with, first of all, confirmed that Caelan Doris is the captain for this Six Nations. I don't think that was going to be, as long as he was fit, I think, wasn't going to be a doubt about that. So the forwards, we've got Tom O'Hearn in there, Finlay Bealham, Tyke Byrne, Jack Boyle, Thomas Clarkson, Jack Conan, Caelan Doris, Edwin Adogbo, Tyke Furlong, Ronan Kelleher, Jeremy Lockman, Joe McCarthy, Michael Milne, Tom O'Toole, Keane Prendergast, James Ryan, Dan Sheehan, Tom Stewart, Nick Timoney, and Josh Van der Fleer. Then in the backs, we have Bundy Aki, Rob Balakoon, Harry Byrne, Craig Casey, Jack Crowley, Nathan Doak, Tom Farrell, Kieran Frawley, James Gibson Park, Hugo Keenan, James Lowe, Stuart McCluskey, Tommy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, Sam Prendergast, Gary Ringrose, and Jacob Stockdale. Okay, so let's have a look at who is missing due to injury that may have been considered. And also before I do that, also Darren Murray and Bryn Ward from Ulster and Connacht, or Connacht and Ulster, should I say, are also training with the squad, but they're going to go to the Ireland 15. And for me, the Ireland 15 squad looks more exciting than this Six Nations squad. But those players who are not here, either unavailable or mostly injured. So we've got Cormac Izuchukwu, who, I really want to see that guy regularly in an Ireland shirt, because I think he will be an absolute sensation in that back row. Could see him, put him in at 6 and then Doris at 8. I think it would be a match made in heaven between those two. With Robbie Henshaw, Calvin Nash, Jimmy O'Brien, and Andrew Porter. Then we have Ryan Baird, Shane Bolton, Mac Hansen, Jordan Larmour, and Paddy McCarthy. So looking at those other injuries, Robbie Henshaw, he's very good at 12 this year, and for me, he probably would have been the starting 12. But the fact that he's out should give more game time to other players, and I think we need that anyway. Then Calvin Nash, I think, would have been nice to see him on the wing, because he kind of got to the point where he looked like he was potentially going to be, a starter ahead of Mac Hansen because of his form with Ireland, but injury, meaning that now other people are going to get a chance ahead of him. Jimmy O'Brien is kind of a bit of a utility player, who's kind of nice to have in your squad, but you don't particularly want to see him in your starting lineup, if that makes sense. He's kind of a jack of all trades, that it's kind of, if you need someone on the bench to cover a bunch of positions, it's good. But I think if he's starting in your team, you're not really too excited, honestly. He's a really solid player, but you're looking for more than solid, really, if you're going to have any chance of being anywhere near the title. Andrew Porter, then, I think it's I don't want anybody to be injured. I think it's good that he is injured, because we definitely need to have more game time for other players, at loose head, especially given his struggles against South Africa in November as well. So, that may be a blessing in disguise for Ireland. Then Ryan Baird, disappointing really there because, with no Izuchuku as well, Bird, for me, probably in the forwards, of the forwards that have certainly been around the squad the last few years, for me, the most improved player. So disappointing that he's not there. Shane Bolton, one of those players that might have been in the squad, but not necessarily be pushing for a start. But, it would still be an exciting player if he did get a start. Mac Hansen, he was filling in a full Mac and doing a really good job, but injured now as well. So chance for other players to maybe stake a claim. Jordan Larmour, type of guy who I think he's a bit of a luxury player for Ireland. Honestly, he's not, for me, he's not greedy enough in terms of try scoring. He seems to get his buzz out of beating players and sometimes going back to beat the same players again as well. That seems to be what his thing is all about, which is great, to be able to beat someone in a very tight space. But if it's not really, producing tries or an assist or something like that, well, it's flashy in a highlight reel, but you'd rather somebody who knows the way to the try line and it, like, I'm not saying Larmour doesn't, but I'm saying that you want someone who, any chance of a try, that's all they're thinking of, right? Is can I get into that, like, squeeze into that spot in the corner, do whatever you can to get that ball down, score the try, keep yourself in play, that kind of player. Kind of similar, like, kind of a James Lowe type, I would say, in terms of, not necessarily the flashiest player in open play, but get him close to the try line and he's going to get over. Jordan Larmour, he'll beat somebody, in his own half and look brilliant, but at times kind of found a little bit wanting, I think, close to the try line. And again, I think it's just that thing of just not being greedy enough and wanting to score, every chance he gets. And if he's got like 2 tries in a game, he wants to have a hat trick, then he wants to have 4 tries or 5 tries or whatever, right? He doesn't have that in him in terms of just that greediness, which is kind of a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, just as a player to watch, he's exciting. He's nice to watch, but in terms of just winning games, maybe not the player that you need in the Ireland team at the moment. Paddy McCarthy then, big loss, I think. As I said, no Andrew Porter, and Paddy McCarthy was looking like he's the next cab off the rank for Lucid. It means that other players will get time in there, the likes of Boyle, etc. But still, McCarthy would have been a nice one to have in there with no Porter as well. Having him in the big games, getting all that experience, because what you don't want is like going into, say, a World Cup year where it's like, oh, this is Paddy McCarthy's first start against whatever team it is, right? If he's the starting loose head, you don't want that. You want them to have already played against those teams or the opposite tight head or whoever it is, right? To just have that little bit more and being missing for Six Nations where, the intensity is just that much higher compared to, say, November, where it can be up and down a little bit. Like here, every game should be hugely intense and there's going to be tons of pressure there. And it's kind of really a great test for your front row. And it would have been great to have him in there. So those are the players that are mentioned, at least on the IRFU site, in terms of not being available for this. There are other players as well, who aren't here too. There's, always kind of more than you can mention. But, for me, one of the ones would be, Ian Henderson, who's kind of been around the squad a lot. And for me, he was kind of at the end I'm not saying his Ireland career is over, but he was kind of at the end of that period where it would be good to see somebody younger coming in instead of him. He may still come back and represent Ireland again in the future, but I did like the fact that he was talking about, the Ulster players and bigging him up and saying, we want to see more Ulster players in our Ireland squad, and there's a lot of players there that deserve their chance. And we've seen some of them in the squad. I think there was others who could have gotten a chance as well. But let's just have a quick look at the squad again and talk about each of the players just very briefly, and then have a look at the Ireland 15 squad as well, and have a look kind of at the players that are in there that may have, may have been good options just to put in if you're looking towards the next World Cup and you want to get young players into the squad and you want to get experience into those players as well. So we'll look at the Six Nations squad first, and then we'll have a look at that. So forwards again. So Tom Ahern, I think it's brilliant he's in there, and he should really be a mainstay of the Ireland squad going forward now. I think, no Ian Henderson, and I think Tom Ahern is the guy that should be in there instead of that. And he should be, AB's fit. He should be in the squad. He's someone that needs to be developed, I think, at the international level. He's kind of like similar traits to Ryan Baird, I would say, in terms of you can give him the ball in open space, and he's able to run, and he's able to finish as well, and he's got good hands, good awareness of the players around him, but also can do the bread and butter of a second row too. So brilliant to see him in the squad. Let's hope that he gets to see decent game time as well through the tournament. Then next is Finlay Bealham, a guy who like a couple of seasons ago where Tyke Furlong wasn't around, and Bealham absolutely filled in brilliantly for him, and for me was one of Ireland's best players, not just like front rows, but best players then. But now I think he's definitely gone off the boil a little bit, but I think it speaks to kind of the dearth of talent that we have at tight head, that there was nobody really that you could point to and say they should be in the squad instead of Finlay Bealham at the minute. So that's kind of, for me, that's the target for Ireland in terms of developing that depth in the front row, especially obviously a tight head, is can you find some, a third tight head who could displace Bealham on merit from the Ireland squad. Not just a case of let's take Bealham out and put another guy in because we want to look to youth. It has to be a case of this guy we genuinely think is going to be better for us if we give him, say, 5 or 6 gaps or something at tight head. At the moment, that option isn't there, so I think Bealham definitely should be in the squad. Then Tadhg Beirne, has been back to decent form at the start of this season. Recently, getting a few yellow cards in big European games for Munster. Not a good look for him, but just his ability, especially when you don't have a Henderson in there. Like Beirne then is your go-to guy, I think, for disrupting opposition mauls, etc. And whether he plays, in the second row or the back row as well, I think he's going to be a very important part of this team. And whatever about giving away yellow cards or getting yellow cards, his ability over the ball, he's got that back again this season. He's a real threat there for turnovers and penalties. So, he should see a lot of game time as long as he is fit. Then we have Jack Boyle, who for me should be the starting loose head, I think, for the tournament. When you're thinking, there's no Porter and there's no Paddy McCarthy as well there. Like, he was obviously the guy before Paddy McCarthy came into the squad that was supposedly the heir apparent for Porter. And so now hopefully they back him and he gets plenty of starts. Might have a bit of a rocky kind of first couple of games, but I think if they back him, he'll come good. And then on the other side of the scrum, then we have Thomas Clarkson there. Now, for me, he should be involved in every single game of the Six Nations, whether that's starting or coming off the bench, as long as he's fit. I could see him, coming off the bench for maybe Furlong as a starter in some of the big games, and then maybe being a starter with Beelum coming off the bench for him. In other games in the tournament, maybe against Italy and depending on how Wales are going, possibly against Wales as well. But for me, Clarkson needs to be involved in every single game as long as he's fit, because if he's not, then it's an absolute waste. If he's maybe coming off, or coming on for the last 20 minutes for Furlong in only 3 of 5 games or wherever, I don't think that's enough for him. He needs serious minutes at this level under his belt by the end of this tournament. So hopefully we see that. Jack Conan then, brilliant player to have there. Like, for me, I think he's best actually off the bench when the game kind of breaks up a little bit, because his skill set in terms of exploiting that, the extra space that's around then, his offloading game, etc., just really suits that. And it means that you can kind of start Doris at 8 and then move him to 6 maybe when Conan comes on. And then Doris, obviously the captain, he's going to start. For me, again, start him at 8 and move him to 6 when whoever it is comes off the bench, be it Conan or somebody else. Then Edwin Adogbo is the only uncapped player in the forwards. So that's why the squad, for me, is a little bit underwhelming, because I would have liked to have seen a couple more players, set for debuts maybe in the forwards. But you can see as well, what they're going for in terms of they want to be competitive in the Six Nations, while just kind of drip feeding these newer players into the squad as well. But for me, then, that means that Ireland need to finish at a very minimum 3rd in the table on the back of that, because otherwise, if you're talking about finishing 4th or below, well, what was the point? Like, why didn't you bring in those younger players instead? Because they could have easily finished 4th or below as well in the tournament. Then Tyke Furlong, for me, certainly a diminished power compared to previous. And also it's a case now of he's getting all these little knocks now, and he's not getting a run of games to basically get up fully to speed for me. And that's kind of the worry, is that he's never been able to get into really good form recently, because he gets a knock and then it's kind of, resets it, as it were. So for me, like, if they were being very brave, it would be start Clarkson and bring Furlong off the bench, because I think that's where he could really have an impact for you. But again, I think they're very conservative. I think it'll be Furlong starting and then one of Beelum or Clarkson on the bench. But yeah, if I was picking, Furlong would be my bench guy to come on, when the front row, the opposition front row, have been softened up a bit, and also again just his ability in the loose, I think would suit coming off the bench. Next then, Ronan Kelleher, probably the best backup hooker in club rugby, I would say. They're at least got to be in the conversation for that, right? No issues with him. Then Jeremy Lockman, good to see him getting a go there. And hopefully he does see some game time as well. Hopefully we see some decent rotation. And again, those front rows, got to get them all kind of in there and getting some game time as well. Joe McCarthy, Ireland seriously lacking real grunt in that second row without him there. So hopefully he stays fit for the tournament. Michael Milne then moved away from Leinster, in order to get game time at Munster, and it's paid off, and he's got his chance there for the Six Nations. So great to see from him, but it's one of these ones where, again, he's a player that if the IRFU and the provinces had kind of their ducks in a row, may have been more prominent had he moved away from Leinster a couple of years ago rather than just recently. Then Tom O'Toole, he's been in the squad before for Six Nations, and he's done a really good job, really good in the carry. And another guy, get him game time in that front row. Then Keane Prendergast, definitely a guy that can fill in. Whether, how much game time he's going to see is going to be interesting, I think, through this Six Nations. May see more than we expect due to injuries, because there's always injuries in the Six Nations. And, he's a decent player. The only thing for me with him is maybe a few too many penalties that he gives away. Got to be better at his discipline. Then James Ryan, kind of unseen player in that second row for Leinster and Ireland, but really poor, decision making in terms of bad clear outs, over like November, and not good to see really from him. Hopefully that's in the past now, and he just kind of sticks to what he's good at. Like keep it clean, hit those rucks, get those clear outs in, and then hopefully with him in the second row as well, the line out will run a little bit better. Dan Sheehan then up there with the best hookers in the world. For me though, almost tempted in some of the games at least to spring him off the bench, because he's just so good in the loose. And again, kind of like Conan, just a skill set for when the game breaks up. I feel like, when you got Sheehan and Kelleher there, and Kelleher is coming on with 20 minutes to go, that's the 20 minutes where I feel like Sheehan would really shine. But obviously he doesn't have fresh legs at that stage. So be interested to see how they use him tactically, whether it's just going to start him as much as they can or not. Then Tom Stewart, was top scorer in the URC at the back of a really good Ulster Mall there a couple of seasons ago. Not quite hit that heights recently, but he's done well enough to get back into the squad, which is brilliant to see. And again, let's see him getting some game time. Hopefully gets maybe 2 appearances through the Six Nations. I think that would be decent. Nick Timoney then, another guy who's been around for a long time but hasn't really got all that much representation. But I think a guy that if he's in your team, you're looking at it and thinking, he'll do a job. But in terms of maybe dislodging some of the more fancied players in the team in terms of who's normally on the team sheet, maybe not quite there, but performing this Six Nations, and that could change everything for him. Then Josh van der Fleer, often kind of sacrificed when they want to change the balance of the back row. But whether he's starting or off the bench, he always gives us all for Ireland. He's improved his carrying recently in recent seasons, and he's also improved his try scoring as well. So another good guy to have in there. And he's one of those players again. If someone is keeping him out, on merit, I think then our back row is going really well because Josh van der Fleer can do an excellent job for Ireland. You know, he's been right up there, World Player of the Year, not at that level at the moment anymore, but still, you know, you never kind of worry about Josh van der Fleer. He's not one of those players where you're thinking, oh no, why is he in the team? It's always good to have him either starting or on the bench. Into the backs then, so we've got Bundy Aki first. Diminished powers, I would say, this season, and maybe could have made way for another player to have a go in the squad. Is my kind of thinking of him. He gives us all, but it's whether, you know, I think it's a case of the heart is willing, but can the body deliver? I think is the question about Bundy at the minute. You know, but he's shown before though, he can absolutely just tear it up and be the best player on the park as well. So let's see which kind of Bundy Aki we get for the Six Nations. Robert Balakoon, brilliant to see him in the squad. You know, had terrible run of injuries over the last couple of years. I remember seeing him during COVID in the Viva, where he made his debut against the USA, and I was very lucky to be in the stadium that day and scored an absolute worldie of a try. And you know, that's the kind of I'd say kind of, we talked about Larmour earlier, and Balakoon is kind of is Jordan Larmour who likes to score tries, if that makes sense. He's got that same kind of ability to just beat someone like in a phone box. But also, I think is a bit greedier in terms of scoring his tries as well. Harry Byrne there, thought he was good the start of the season for Leinster, certainly better than Prendergast. The last little while, I'm not too sure whether he's at that level anymore, but I think in terms of just kicking from the tee, if you look at the 310s that are there, he's the only one that hasn't kind of struggled recently. So that could be certainly something crucial. You know, someone who can nail those kicks from out wide, tight angles and distance. You know, could be the difference in some games as well. Craig Casey, great live wire, brilliant to see him in there. Let's see him getting plenty of game time because he's due it, I think. And I think if we didn't have James Gibson Park, he would have been our starting 9 for a year or two now. Jack Crowley then, you know, poor performance recently in Europe from him, and wobbly off the tee, which is not normal for him. He's normally very solid from the tee. Kicking from hand as well, a bit mixed too. So feels like he kind of maybe needs, you know, get into this environment and get his confidence back, and hopefully he'll be purring through the rest of the Six Nations. Nathan Doak then, the only back set to make a debut, or uncapped at least, could make his debut during the Six Nations. Feels like he's been around forever, and now, you know, established as the, you know, after like no Cooney there, to kind of contend with as much at Ulster. Feels like now he's established himself there and he's been rewarded, you know, by being brought into the Ireland squad. A kicking 9, which normally Farrell doesn't go for. So be interested to see again how much game time he gets to see. Tom Farrell then, really good start to the season from him. Rightly, you know, got called up for November. Maybe gone off the boil a little bit, but I think that's more his Munster, as in the team, have gone off the boil. So in this environment, let's see the best from him. Kieran Frawley then, still at Leinster, but he's made the choice to move to Connacht at the end of the season to make sure that he is, you know, more chances to actually stay involved in this squad and not be kind of a forgotten man. Great utility player to potentially have, you know, 23 in his back for you off the bench. Then James Gibson Park, Still the best 9 that we have available. But one thing I'd love to see from him is when teams like go after us at the breakdown, I'd love to see him shouting more at his forwards to say, come and sort this out. It can't be happening like time and again, because it always seems when things like that happen, we have to wait until we go in like at the break and then the coaches get stuck into the players. I'd love to see Jameson do that a little bit himself. Hugo Keenan then, kind of surprised he's there because like he's been injured forever, it seems. And whether Ireland kind of do this thing where they name a player in the squad who's injured, and then it'll be like every time they give an update, oh yeah, he was involved in training this week. He's in the mix to play, in the next game, and then he doesn't play and he's not in the 23 and he's not anywhere near the 23. Then the next game they do the same. And then maybe the last game of the tournament or something, he comes on. So, how close is he to playing? I'm not too sure. James Lowe then, always been good for Ireland. He certainly had a dip in form recently though. One of the good things about him is that booming boot that he has. But he's been a bit wayward with that recently, putting kicks out on the full, etc. So let's hope that he gets back to his best, I think, through the Six Nations. Stuart McCluskey then, really good player to have in your centres. But what I'd like to see more is that the players around them, being more aware of the fact that McCluskey, when he carries, he's always going to be looking for the offload. So you should have, whether it's, say, Osborne or Ringrose or whoever, or Farrell, or one of the players coming off the wing, running that line, just for him to pop an offload and then to go through the gap. That's because normally when he's getting tackled like that, it's a couple of players tackling him, right? And he gets his arms free and he's ready to pop the tackle. And therefore there's some kind of space in and around that kind of contact area where a player can go through. But I don't think, we anticipate that enough. So, hopefully we can do that through the Six Nations. Tommy O'Brien then, probably like if he's fit, I would say he's going to be the starting, right wing ahead of Balakoon, I would imagine. Got lots of pace and he's such a ferocious tackler as well. Just keep legal on the tackles is the only thing with that. Jamie Osborne then, he could fill in fullback and he could play on that left wing as well because he also has a booming boot there too. So, definitely good to have options there. Sam Prendergast, has been looking better ball in hand, for Leinster certainly, and has been kind of getting players through gaps and stuff, a bit better than Harry Byrne. But for me, option taking definitely has to improve. Kicking from the tee has to improve, and kicking from hand, and not just the kicks themselves, but the selections in terms of where he's kicking, when he's kicking, etc., and what he's trying to do with his kicks. There have been times where he's put up, big up and unders, and they like his teammate will arrive under the ball, and everybody's kind of standing there for a second or two, waiting for it to come down, rather than coming onto it at pace and being able to kind of dominate the aerial collision. So, definitely improvements to be made there. But in that environment, I think himself and Crowley pushing each other, and then you have the likes of Harry Byrne and Frawley in there as well in the mix. Hopefully that environment brings them all on. Gary Ringrose then, for me, the way Leinster are playing at the minute, it's not really suiting Ringrose. So being in the Irish environment, hopefully we see kind of him get back to his best. And then Jacob Stockdale, who I think is a fantastic player for Ireland, like been out of the mix for kind of other than the last year or so, but for a long time before that, right? Burst onto the scene, looked an absolute amazing player, broke the Six Nations record, and then just injury, back for a little while, injury, just that cycle. Now he's back to his best. We know he's gone well at fullback at times as well. We know we can play on the wing as well. So I think a great player again to have in around your 23. But it looks like there's plenty of competition there on paper is the thing. But we do know also that Farrell kind of has his favourites. And even though there might be a lot of really good talent in the squad, it doesn't mean that talent is actually going to see the match day 23. Okay, so that's the squad. Let's then have a look at the Ireland 15 and just talk quickly about some of the players who may have been involved here. So first of all, Diarmuid Barron definitely could have been an option. I think you would have been talking about Tom Stewart in terms of kind of who would miss out at hooker, but he's been very good for a couple of seasons at least. Then we have Billy Bowen, Paul Boyle as well, Sam Green, Max Deegan from Leinster. One of these players where I think if he'd been at another province, would be starting week in, week out. But given that he's at Leinster, he's in and around the 23, but a lot of times on the bench. Then Brian Gleeson from Munster. Someone I think that he needs to have more game time at Munster before we can consider him at Ireland. But he's definitely one for the future. Whether that future though is this World Cup cycle or next World Cup cycle, I'm not sure. But for me, again, the RFU for me should be saying to Munster, this guy has to be playing more often. Sam Elo then at Connacht, I think a guy who, if there are injuries, may actually get a go. But for the moment, just keep doing what you're doing at Connacht. I think Charlie Irvine then at Ulster, Ollie Yeager at Munster, certainly a guy who could have been in the mix for a spot in the front row. Sean Jansen been playing brilliantly for Connacht. He is that that Gavin Coombs type of player who given the ball 2 or 3 meters out from the line, and he's getting over that line, he's getting the ball down, and he's had some brilliant performances for Connacht, and I think he's one of those players that they can't be too far away from a call up to the squad. I think Diarmuid Mangan then from Leinster, filled in kind of pretty well to start the season. I think he's kind of at the start of his kind of journey towards potentially getting into the main squad though. Gus McCarthy then could have been another option at hooker, but I think having 3 hookers from Leinster in the squad is kind of counterproductive as well. And he's a guy I think that next season, if he hasn't already thought about it, he should be thinking about moving to another province, because I think if he does that, then he's more likely to be in the mix in those squads. Because at the moment he's sitting behind Sheehan and Kelleher, and he's not, like, unless there's injuries, he's not going to see any of the big games. Dara Murray then training with the main squad before joining up with this squad, so he's definitely close enough there. Very good line-out operator, especially defensive line-out, and could be a great player to have in there to disrupt the opposition line-out. Stephen Smith then in there. You got Bryn Ward is the other player who's training with the first team before joining up here, so he's obviously one that's on the radar. Scott Wilson has been brilliant for Ulster this season, and another guy who can't be too far away from potentially forcing his way into the squad. Then into the backs, then Shane Daly, been brilliant at fullback for Munster, and the fact that, we, with the Keenan injury, I think if Keenan doesn't play this Six Nations, or only plays the last game of the Six Nations, for me, then Shane Daly should have been in that squad instead of him, because at least he would have been a genuine contender to play every single game. Not necessarily getting picked, but at least it's not a case of, well, Keenan's injured, so he's not in the mix. At least he'd be fit and in the mix. Then you got Matthew Devine from Connacht. You got Cal Ford from Connacht as well. I think Ford is one of those, he was maybe on the radar a bit to potentially come in at 10, but then the likes of Frawley and Prendergast came along, and maybe he got shifted down the pecking order from there. Fintan Gunn at Leinster, again, one of those players I think hasn't seen enough game time in big games to really be considered there. James Hume has been doing really well at Ulster, certainly could be in the mix there. Dan Kelly from Munster there. Joshua Kenny, or JJ Kenny, for me has been the standout in the Leinster backline in terms of players coming through this year, and he can't be too far away, I think, from winning an Ireland cap. Ben Murphy then, would have loved to have seen him in the mix at 9 there, because I think he's a player that could be a point of difference if he was in that squad. His brother Jack Murphy at Ulster, needs more game time for Ulster, I think, before being considered for Ireland. Jude Postlethwaite, certainly a guy who could have been in the squad, and again another guy who, if Bundy Aki wasn't involved, he's the guy I think that you would put in there to be, because he's been so good for Ulster. He's such a strong carrier, and he's got a great hands and great offloading game as well. Zach Ward has been electric on the wing for them too, and couldn't have been too far away from potentially being called up as well. And there's tons of other players, but one other player I'll mention who's not in either squad and not mentioned in terms of being injured either is Charlie Tector. For me, he's been the standout midfielder for Leinster this year, like in those centres. He's been playing at 12, and he's been doing really well there. But because they've got Henshaw, Ringrose, and then they have Ioane there as well, he doesn't get a look in the big games, and therefore he doesn't get considered for the Ireland squad. But if it was up to me, again, he'd be a player where it'd be either a case of he's the guy we're going to back, and therefore, whether it's Henshaw or Ringrose or sorry, Ioane, but you're not going to be seeing as many games as you thought you were, or maybe Ioane becomes an option on the wing maybe instead. But he's either got to be involved at Leinster, or him or somebody else has to move next season, because you can't have talent like that sitting in the stands for the big games. And I know, like, for a lot of these players, Leinster is the home province. They want to play at Leinster, and it's hard to get them to move to other places. But I think the likes of for players like that must be identified as potentials for the Ireland squad. The likes of Andy Farrell or Simon Easterby or whoever, have a sit down with him and say, listen, this is where we think you are at the minute. This is where you need to be. And if you're not playing in big games for Leinster, then you need to be moving to an Ulster or a Munster or a Connacht to be playing regularly and in bigger games than you're playing at the minute. But yeah, that's a look at the squad. Again, you can see that there's plenty of players there who definitely could be involved in this Six Nations that aren't. But at the same time, looking at the squad, you can't say it's a bad squad. What it's about now is really, I think these are the players that have been picked. It's now up to those coaches to get this team playing better than they were in November, because November was, nowhere near the potential that these players have in terms of delivering performances every week. If they perform the way they did in November, then it doesn't matter whether you've brought in youngsters or experienced players. You're looking at finishing third or fourth, I think, in this Six Nations, and then maybe even if one tight game went against them, it could even be fifth in the tournament. So for me, a success for this Six Nations would be finishing top two. I think France certainly are the favourites. I would have England as the next favourites, but certainly in terms of all the teams, I think England are the team coming in with the momentum compared to other teams. I think Scotland kind of fancy themselves, especially based on how well Glasgow have been doing through the Champions Cup. For them, I think the worry for them, though, is the mentality of the Edinburgh players when mixed in seems to have an effect on them. So, Ireland, don't want to finish behind Scotland in the tournament. And then you have Wales, who, for them, I think just getting a win in the Six Nations will be progress. And in Italy, who, year on year, some years they look like, they could knock anyone over. And other years, people start talking about why are they in the Six Nations, and they've yo-yoed a little bit between those two over the past few years. So for Ireland, the minimum obviously is fourth place, I think. But in terms of having picked a squad like this, I think, again, success would be top two. But whether they can do that or not, we're probably looking at, honestly, with this squad, probably looking at third, given again, looking back at the November games. But anything better than third, I think, would be a bit of a boon at the minute.